right, let's start. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Exploring the Recycling Loop, a webinar presented as part of ecologiQ's Greener Infrastructure Week. I'm Louise Barrett, Senior Program Manager at ecologiQ, and I'll be your facilitator today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we are each joining and pay my respects to their elders past and present, extending that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. And a bit of housekeeping. In this virtual format, your microphones will be muted. Feel free to type questions in the Q&A chat and we'll address them towards the end of the session, time permitting. This session will be recorded and we will share the recording with you afterwards. So today's session overview. We'll be discussing all things recycling, how recycling has evolved over the years, and importantly, the intersection between broader recycling systems and the focused efforts of organisations like Planet Ark. We'll explore how Planet Ark's initiatives overlap with the government's Recycled First policy. And this session will provide insights into how these efforts work together to strengthen the recycling loop and build a circular economy. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. So first of all, we have Alexis Davison joining us today, Executive Program Director at Major Roads Projects Victoria. Welcome, Alexis. Thank you.
Also
Rebecca Gilling, CEO of Planet Ark. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so let's get this chat underway. So in this first segment, I'd like to explore with you both kind of National Recycling Week and the Recycled First policy. So Rebecca, could you explain National Recycling Week and how Planet Ark's initiatives encourage Australians to engage with recycling?
Sure. Well, this is, of course, National Recycling Week that we're in. It's one of our major campaigns of the year. It began in 1996. At a time when there was very little in the way of recycling for householders at curbside, as we call it. There was newspapers and the beginnings of things like glass jars and bottles. But we also worked with industry associations to try and increase the availability and scope of materials that were available to be recycled. So on the one hand, it was about increasing the opportunities for recycling at the household level. And on the other, it was really about educating consumers and householders that this was something that they could embrace. It would reduce the amount of waste going to landfill and really add value to the whole system. And we know in New South Wales last week, Environment Minister Penny Sharp alerted us to the fact that we are going to run out of landfill in New South Wales by 2030 because of the rate of consumption of materials and the stagnation of recycling levels. So that's quite an alarm, and I think it's a similar case in Victoria as well, that landfills are in diminishing supply. So we've got to try and curb that and also to capture that value that is in those materials. So we've really got to stop thinking about waste and start thinking about resources. And that's really what we're trying to encourage consumers to do. It's also about things beyond the curbside bin. We've worked again with industry associations to set up product stewardship schemes, things like cartridges for Planet Ark. We worked with the mobile phone industry to develop what we started out as phones for Planet Ark and morphed into mobile muster, which many on this call may be familiar with. So it's at curbside, it's also out of home, all those opportunities to increase the collection and reuse, particularly of valuable materials. This year's National Recycling Week theme is about joining the cycle. And while recycling is critical to that, it's also about getting people to understand and move up what we call the ladder of R's. So they focus more on reducing, reusing, repurposing, and refurbishing and redesign. So really, that's the full scope of National Recycling Week.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. And Alexis, how does this, how does Ecologic's Recycled First policy kind of align with the goals and of National Recycling Week to support sustainability on a broader infrastructure scale? So how do these two elements kind of connect, or where do they connect?
I think they align really well, Louise. And, while Planet Ark is raising awareness and trying to sort of teach us how to, do better, with all these recycled materials, if we keep them in use, we need to find end markets for them. And so, Rebecca used the word system before, and it really is a system where we have all got a role to play to sort of make it work. And our role in delivering infrastructure, we can create demand for these things so that we can talk about resources and, not waste, as Rebecca said. And the Recycled First policy has really been a catalyst to make that thinking much more intentional at the start of a project. There was some good things happening, but it was ad hoc and not a systemic kind of approach. And so, we talk about the recycling loop, and it's really great to work with organisations like Planet Ark. So, we can sort of create the demand and, cleaner waste streams or resource streams, if we're going to use the word resources, makes it easier for those things to be turned into other things that we can then use in infrastructure delivery. So I think there's a really nice alignment between the work that Planet Ark do and the work that we're doing. And, we both need to do our bit for both of us to succeed.
Yeah, and I think in the context of landfill availability diminishing, it's getting more important around the household and the thing that you do every day, and how that then, I guess, connects in with our major infrastructure projects, and us taking that resource and making it into something that can go into our infrastructure and help that asset perform better.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So second part of this second segment is about Planet Ark's role in advancing recycling practices. So Rebecca, beyond National Recycling Week and the initiatives that you kind of spoke about and the themes, what are some of the other programs that Planet Ark has developed to make recycling kind of accessible to Australians?
Well, underpinning National Recycling Week and our other recycling efforts is our database and information website, which is called Recycling Near You. And this is a fabulous resource that's used by around 3.7 million, has 3.7 million visits a year from Australians who obviously embrace it. Because of its ease of use. You simply put in your postcode or your council area name, and there's a drop-down list of materials that you can select to find out what your council will accept at curbside, but also the drop-off locations for all sorts of other items, anything from mattresses to, construction materials, a whole range of materials. Plastics, of course, is a key issue of concern for people across the board, particularly at the household level, we know. So people want to see those materials captured and reused. We also, with the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation and other partners, developed the Australasian Recycling Label, which is now on about half of the products that appear on shelves. And that's a fabulous tool. In fact, it's considered by many to be world-class, possibly among the best in the world, because of its simplicity. Essentially, it shows you what to do with each part of a product's packaging, because we know that many products come with more than one type of packaging. So what do I do with the lid of the jar? Do I keep it attached, or can I put it in the recycling bin separately? This is a really useful tool that people, and we know also from our research that the place where people want to get the information is at the point of sale, but also when they're standing at the bin. What do I do with this? So we developed the Australasian Recycling Label because we knew that there were hundreds of different labelling schemes out there that simply were causing confusion. One of those, of course, is the plastic identification code, which appears on plastic containers, which is a Mobius loop, which looks like a recycling symbol, has a number inside of it. In fact, that just identifies what type of plastic it is. It doesn't say that it can necessarily be recycled in your local area. So to counteract that confusion, the Australasian recycling label was really a very simple tool, and I think it's been embraced by government as well. So we hope to see it actually mandated sometime in the not too distant future. Finally, of course, we've developed the Australian Recycling Hub, or ACE Hub as we call it, which is really trying to educate business as well as consumers about the opportunities in what we call the circular economy. And that's really the sorts of stuff that is happening, that Alexis was talking about, that's happening with ecologiQ, is getting those materials back in circulation to avoid the use of virgin materials, because we know our consumption rates are among the highest in the world. We're the third highest consumers per capita of raw materials. And at the same time, we're the fourth lowest in terms of extracting value from those materials. So the ACE Hub is really to help people understand the opportunities to become part of the circular economy. And it's fabulous to see the work that ecologiQ is doing, getting those materials and keeping them in good use.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that especially with the packaging and the labelling, it just really helps simplify recycling for everyday Australians. I know that my kids in their daycare, you know, they identify it. So it's like, you know, it really is going across a wide demographic, really. And I guess it's that labelling that helps make it an easier, more seamless kind of part of life, and hopefully normalising recycling across households so we can get those keep it going. So next segment here, Alexis, is about using recycled materials in infrastructure. So could you share with us how the Recycled First policy is setting new standards in terms of you know, benchmarks for sustainable infrastructure in Victoria, and you know, what are some real key highlights for you and observations around kind of behaviour and how we're moving behaviour to raise that benchmark as a result of the program and policy?
Yeah, I think the Recycled First policy, it was released in 2020, and I think since then we've seen some really great things happening, because it requires some early thinking up front in a project. We're not just relying on a fortunate accident or an ad hoc thing to happen, or, you know, we're not relying on the sheer will of one individual to get something through. It really is changing the way we think about our projects and the materials we use to deliver them. I think because the policy requires people, project teams, to optimise, and we very deliberately chose the word optimise instead of maximise, or, you know, you must have at least this much something or that much something, because we really, it's an encouragement policy, you know, like we want people to do better and we don't want to set people up to fail. So having the word optimise in there really encourages people to do better and think about the project, the location, the geography matters, access to materials varies across the state. We don't want recycled content at the expense of quality or cost. We want it all. We want good quality projects that are cost effective and, you know, are contributing to using some of these resources that we don't want to see going into landfills. So I think, you know, we're sort of seeing people think very differently about materials, and we want to make, you know, things that are new and emerging become business as usual. And, you know, for anyone that was at lunch yesterday, you would have heard Kevin talk about, you know, repeating successes on projects and repeating that on the next project, and standardizing and making things repeatable and easy and common is really what we're striving for. And so I think, you know, like there's a lot of, like Rebecca talks about education, and I think for us too, education has been really critical. With the increases that we've seen, we're up to something like 5 million tonnes of recycled content in infrastructure, in the last couple of years. And that has really been possible because we have educated people on what is permissible. 5 years ago, you went up to an engineer and asked them what you could use in terms of recycled content. They probably would have looked at you blankly. Whereas now there's a broad awareness that recycled content is okay. And alternatives to virgin materials are actually okay in terms of their performance and their cost and their availability. And we need to embrace that.
Yeah. So I'm hearing some themes here, some similarities between both of what you're sharing with us, and context is really important. So construction, demolition waste over the last 2-3 years is actually on the increase. Again, ensuring that we have the right processes in place to recycle and keep those things in highest and best use, and behaviour change. So through education and tools, really useful tools, we can drive greater uptake or greater use of encouraging people to recycle, but also that reuse element where we keep that material in its highest and best use. So yeah, I'm seeing
making things easy for people. Like, people generally want to do the right thing, or they want to do good, but it's very confusing. Like Rebecca was talking about the numbers on plastics, like that confuses a lot of people. And so education is really critical to doing better for both of us.
Yeah, I have stood in front of the recycling bin many a time and gone, okay, this plastic, this number 7. What is that one again? To squish it. Is it like a squishy plastic, or is it like, not a squishy plastic, but I mean a crunchy one?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Tools is just so powerful in this context, as we all have to really pull our weight, for a better way to describe it, in terms of contributing to making sure that we recycle. So
yeah.
Our next segment here is around challenges and opportunities. So I'm sure you both have lots to share in this segment, and we could probably spend the rest of the session just on this part alone. But Rebecca, what are some of the main challenges Planet Ark has encountered in promoting effective recycling, and how are you addressing? So what are those kind of pinch points, I guess, for you?
Yes, well, you mentioned the key one, I think, Louise, which is behaviour change. We know how hard it is in all aspects of our lives to change our habits, but particularly to change bad habits to good habits. Somehow it's much easier to adopt a bad habit than it is to change a bad one to a good one. So part of that, of course, is breaking down barriers. Knowledge is important, but unless you can really simplify things for people, and as Alexis said, make it as easy as possible for people. It's also about people's confidence in the system. We know that as a result of China's national sword policy, which essentially said that China, along with a lot of other countries, was no longer going to simply take our crap, even potentially recyclable crap, and that we really had to take responsibility for it ourselves and develop our own systems. And so that took some time to build up. We're still trying to work on building the infrastructure, because we've got to apply systems thinking to this, and it's a system-wide problem. But unfortunately, in the lead up to this year's National Recycling Week, we commissioned some research that told us that still 1 in 3 of respondents to that research believed that the stuff that they put in their recycling bin was still going to landfill. And part of that, of course, is that the media picks up on any problem that they see, even though it may be a tiny proportion of the total system. And we know it is, because the facts are that about 80% of what goes into your curbside recycling bin actually does get recycled. About 14% is what we call contamination. That is, people putting things that are not recyclable into the recycling bin instead of into their waste bin. And the remaining 6% is stuff that has got broken along the way, things like broken glass jars and bottles, or things that the system at the recycling centre simply can't deal with. May be recyclable, but that particular system can't deal with it. So the stats are good in terms of what actually gets recycled when you put it in the right bin. Another of the problems we face is the good quality materials that could be recycled at home in the yellow bin, from the yellow bin, that end up in the red lidded bin or the waste bin if it's not red lidded in your area. This is another of the problems, that we don't have a harmonised system across the country because waste has traditionally been at the local and state level. It's encouraging to see that the federal government is now taking this whole issue seriously and really working to devise policy, including harmonisation. So really getting people to understand what goes in what bin. Another of the big issues we face is food waste. And, close to half of what goes into your waste bin is actually organic material that can be recycled. We're seeing increasing opportunities for what's called FOGO at the household level. That's food and garden organics recycling, so that we can get that organic material out of waste bins, because we know that when that goes to landfill and gets compacted in an anaerobic situation, it generates methane gas, which is a vastly more damaging greenhouse gas even than carbon dioxide. So all in all, I think those are a lot of the issues that we face. And again, educating people, breaking down the barriers, giving them the confidence in the system are really keys to improving those results.
That's kind of, as you were talking there, kind of reflecting on one of the kind of key words you said about a harmonized system. And I feel that's what we all really need to work together in our, obviously can be quite easy sometimes to be in your swim lane and stick there, but I think that harmonization and how we get there and the role of government is going to be really fascinating space for everyone in the next 2-3 years as we deal with this kind of over consumerism, and also having to really understand what goes in what bin, and doing that in a really conscious way.
And if I could just also add the importance of government procurement, because Alexis touched on this. If we don't have markets for these materials at the other end, and government needs to play that role of providing that pull factor to get those materials back into the system.
Yeah. And that's a really important point, because, like, it is a system. We've got, processes, we've got people at the curbside putting things in, hopefully the right bin. We've got, clever people making interesting products using the resources that come out of those processing facilities. And our role is, the demand end, like we're at the sort of the user end, if you like. And, we want to buy more recycled stuff. So, we're encouraging people to innovate and make new products. But yeah, it is a system.
Yeah, and I think also when we get to kind of talk about our case studies here at ecologiQ around what's been successfully used on our projects, I reckon that's a real incentive for behaviour change, because you know what you're putting in your bin here is going to be going into another life there. And I think that's actually really encouraging, and I think a really positive part of us kind of sharing what we do here, achieve here at ecologiQ. So Alexis, over to you. So on the infrastructure side, what challenges do we face? Do we face at ecologiQ in terms of, and projects, in terms of integrating recycled materials into major projects and infrastructure, and how are we overcoming those obstacles?
It's interesting, because when we sort of started our program, we talked to a lot of people to just understand, the landscape and the lay of the land, and what were the barriers to increasing the use of recycled content. Not all the barriers are real. And so we've worked really hard to understand what is actually preventing use. And it goes back to that sort of education piece. And, one of the first things we did was write the guides, because a technical specification for the delivery of infrastructure is a pretty dry read, and not many people would have trawled through all of them. So actually understanding what was permissible already was hit and miss. So we worked really hard on building awareness and educating people on what was possible. And that sort of, understanding where it is a barrier, because we would talk to people and they said, oh no, the specs don't allow it, but they do actually. So here you go. So understanding, is it a thinking or a mindset that's preventing more products to be used, or is it actually a real barrier that something is prohibited? And there were some specifications that were prohibitive, and where we've come across those, issues, like the plastic noise walls is a good example. We wrote a new specification for recycled plastic panels. And so now there's an Australian spec that every jurisdiction can benefit from that permits recycled plastic to be used in noise wall panels on our infrastructure projects. So, there are challenges in people's understanding of products, and a recycled alternative needs to be considered as a different product doing the same job. It's not like for like. Plastic doesn't behave like concrete, so you have to handle it, store it, install it differently. So it's all of that educating, it's really the key. Like, I can't stress enough, building awareness has been the absolute, silver bullet, if you like, in the successes that we've seen, because, that sort of understanding the products and knowing about the products and knowing what you can do has been really critical. And so, we want to work with our contractors and our suppliers and our designers and everybody who's involved in the delivery of infrastructure to really understand why not? Instead of asking why not? And that's kind of where we want to be.
Yeah, I think it's the conversation, the ability to have a tool so people can go kind of source things on their own, but also the ability to sit down and have a conversation sometimes to challenge preconceptions. Really big.
I think the other thing that we saw is that people didn't know where to go to get the products, and we've got these small and medium sort of size enterprises making really interesting things, but like being that kind of broker between the suppliers and the contractors and making sure that people, if you're in a competitive sort of project environment, it's unlikely that you're going to take a big risk and go buy a product from someone that you've never heard of, that you don't understand, that you've never used before. And so really working hard to build that relationship between the contractor and the supplier before they're in a competitive project environment, where there's risk involved and there's deadlines and budgets and all that sort of stuff that we experience. So making sure that we build awareness outside of the project environment has been really critical.
It
all goes back to education.
And innovation, if I could
and
just
innovation, yes.
as well, because we know that we are great innovators in this country, and it's really exciting working in this space and seeing the sorts of solutions that clever people are coming up with.
Yeah, and we're seeing all sorts of interesting things, particularly plastic, products that are being invented and used on our projects that we would have never seen before. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I think that innovation and innovation brokers and those kind of terminologies are so important in this space. And I look at where we have come from, 2020, like you said, Rebecca, China didn't want our crap anymore. And look where we are now, like in terms of really pushing forward and making it easier. Still got a fair mountain of waste and resource to climb, but definitely making inroads. Okay, so I'm just going to check out our questions, of which I think we've had such a great session. We've got none in the chat here, but we only have a minute to go, so I think that's okay. So with that, I think I'll ask Alexis and Rebecca for any kind of final thoughts before I wrap up the session.
Well, I think for me, it would really be about use the tools to find out what you can do to do things better, understand that we really have a big problem to solve here, both at the local level, but also globally. And so this is both an opportunity and a responsibility for all of us.
I agree. And I would just encourage people not to be afraid of recycled alternatives. Be brave. And, you know, we're here to help if anybody's got any questions, technical or otherwise. But yes, don't be afraid. Try something new. It is a big problem and we all have a responsibility.
Yeah, not to be frightened of it, but yeah, approach the
embrace
challenge.
it.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Alexis and Rebecca, for your time today, and thank you for sharing your insights about, the impactful work that you do and advancing the recycling loop. I think today's discussion has shown how kind of our collective actions, whether in households, businesses, or large-scale infrastructure, bring us closer to a circular economy. And we're all about needing to harmonise what we do to get the best efficiencies out of it. So thank you all for joining us today. And obviously, this is Greener Infrastructure Week, so we have a lot more coming up. We've got concrete steps to carbon reduction at 12 p.m. and build waste in and plan waste out as our offering across today. And we've got more webinars throughout the week. So please check them out and please join. And with that, once again, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Alexis, and everyone else out there. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Great
Thank
to
you.
chat.